How's that new theme song, Mark?
I actually can't hear it. It's not
You
coming
could,
through.
it's
No,
not coming
I
through.
no, it's just quiet, but don't worry about it.
Okay, it may not come through the whole recording. I'm sorry, people. I
Uh,
tried my new theme song out. This is Dave Emmons with A Strange Reality, and my guest is Mark Olly, and he's been on here before, and he one heck of a guy, and he's a musician. He's an archaeologist. He also kind of does some classes at a local college, and I don't have it right here in my notes. I've been in a real hurry here lately, and he's a TV producer, presenter, writer, lecturer, broadcaster, a musician, as I said, lecturer at Wilmslow Guild in
yeah,
the
well,
University of Chester. And he also heads up his own archaeological unit. He's met with the Rolling Stones. Well, he didn't meet them, but he was playing the same gig, the same
no,
concert
no,
hall.
no, I did end up meeting them.
Okay,
Yeah, I
yeah,
did.
yeah, in the
Yeah,
bar, yeah.
After show, yeah, after
Yeah,
show,
yeah.
yeah.
That's even better when you meet them over a couple of drinks.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So yeah, so you're still playing gigs, and you're playing with a band called Wolf and Copperworm. You work
yeah.
with them. You got books, got 10 or 11 of them now, and you're working on a new one. We're going to be talking about the new one, and it's
Mm.
with Philip Mantle Publishing, and Philip Mantle. I guess he's doing okay. Mark Olly,
Um, I got a message off him last week, so that means
yeah,
he's back in circulation again. But I don't think he's with the general population yet. I think he's still in recovery,
yeah,
because he did end up in hospital for a while, and his wife told us all to leave him alone for a bit, which we have done. So I'm yet to contact. I'll respond to him at some point,
okay.
but I don't want to add to his woes.
Yeah, a lot of people in the UFO community, a lot of people in the UFO community
Mm,
know him, and they like
yeah,
him. I so did
yeah,
I. I've had him on my show once or twice.
yeah,
Great guy, and I know
yeah,
he's a great publisher. But
yeah.
speaking of that, Mark Ollie, with all the other things that you do, you keep busy, and you still
Mm,
play music, and that's great. You're a drummer,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I play guitar and drums. I got a picture of drums over here
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I played in a band, and I got my war medals there. So, and then my guitar is off to the side, and I got another Takamine acoustic guitar down below. I haven't got that up, but that is a Fender ukulele, Mark. Yeah,
That's a nice instrument.
yeah,
Yeah,
Fender ukulele.
yeah.
I didn't go for the cheapos.
Oh
So
no,
this,
That's American Fender as well. We only get imports over here, obviously. So,
yeah,
the real deal.
I bought that in
Yeah,
Alaska, and
yeah.
I got a little bored, and I was going to teach guitar up there, and a couple they only got two music shops there in Fairbanks, and
Ah.
I was going to teach guitar at one of them, and I decided, well, I won't do that. I'll go ahead and so I bought myself a ukulele, and I try to learn, try to learn the chords on a ukulele, a little different than a guitar.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Well,
so
one of the greatest ukulele players of all time is a guy called George Formby, who was around during the Second World War,
yeah,
and he's credited as being one of the very first ever musical film stars because he used to produce, films and what have you with his music in, and he used to live in the next street from where I'm sat
really.
now. Yeah, so ukulele connections. There you go.
So he did a lot of lead parts in a lot of orchestra songs, right?
Yeah, he wrote a lot of
Yeah,
songs and played solo songs and all sorts of stuff. But George Formby, yeah, go and have a look at that. George Formby.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you are working on another book, and you're a
Oh,
prolific
yes.
writer. This is what, book 11 or maybe? I think
What's it going to be? It's 10. I think it's number
10,
10. Mind
10.
you, it depends. Depends if you count the books that I've contributed to.
Yeah.
Because certainly since lockdown, I've contributed to two other books. So
Yeah.
it's either 10 or 13, depending on which way you look at it, you
Well,
know.
if your name's on
Yeah.
the cover, then you get credit for that book.
Well, I wrote the introduction to one of
Yeah.
them, and there's a couple of sort of life stories accounts that appear in another one of them, which I did. So, yeah, it's been
I,
a busy few years.
yeah, I know
Yeah.
you know a lot about a lot of different subjects, and that's why it's easy to talk to you. I can slip up and name a wrong topic, and you'll still be able to cover it. So, but no, I got my
Uh,
ACDC shirt on today, and I love
hey,
ACDC, and I'm an old guy,
yeah,
but I love ACDC.
yeah, we do
And
too. We play them in our. We have a couple of cover songs that we do in our live set. So
wow,
yeah, yeah.
their beats are simple, aren't they, Mark?
They
They're
are, but a famous drummer once said it's not what you play, it's what you don't play. And they're a classic example of that. You can't overplay them, and all the stops and the gaps are absolutely crucial. I mean, the start of a whole lot of rosé, which we do, is just unbelievably complex to get everybody
yeah,
together,
it
and
is.
yeah, so it sounds really simple, but they always say the best tracks in the world sound really simple, but they're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, that's I know that's but
Uh,
we did Highway to Hell when I was in a band,
yeah,
and the
we do that
singer
one as
can
well.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
singer can only do it once a night because his voice would it'd tear his voice up. You know, you get that gravelly
yeah,
voice from that AC/DC guy. Wow, I don't know
yeah,
how he does it.
yeah,
Wow, but no,
yeah,
let's talk about your book, Mark Olly, and you're from the UK, of course,
yeah.
and you're talking about a biblical book, early Christians, Gnostics, Templars, and I wanted to throw in Oak Island in there because they're finding out that Oak Island
Yeah,
on TV has got
yeah,
Knights Templars touch to it.
yeah. It looks like it.
Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about what you're writing there, the early
Okay.
Christians.
It's become a bit of a legend with anybody that knows me because there are two books that have been going forever. I've been writing them forever. One of them came to fruition with Philip a couple of years ago. I finished the King Arthur book.
Yeah,
And it had only taken me 45 years to get it into print. So I think that's a world record, okay? But the biblical one, that's been going 1 year longer and it still hasn't arrived in print yet. Anybody that does any kind of early biblical study will understand the frustration of doing a book like this because every time you think you've got everything, okay, you're like, right, that's it, nothing more, can't add any more. They find another document or they find another library. So you like the Nag Hammadi Library, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Oxyrhynchus Papyrus, and all this kind of, and they're just churning them out, and they keep translating them at the rate of about one or two every couple of years. So
yeah,
just when you think it's finished, it's like, oh, that's it, that's a wrap, I've covered it all. They'll come out with something else. Broadly speaking, the idea of the book is to go back to the origins of Christianity based only on stuff that was written at the time. So the aim of the book is essentially the same as the King Arthur book, which was to get back to the original material that was written as near to the time as humanly possible. And then, of course, with the Bible, you've got to prove that that's what that material is. You've got to put forward the evidence, etc. But that material, it's accrued, it accumulated over a period of about 400 years. So, from like zero up to 400, you've got a load of stuff going on in that
right.
time period.
Hmm.
And then everybody's like, oh, well, Dark Ages, this, that, and the other, whatever, it must have disappeared. Well, no, it didn't disappear. It stayed there. So fast forward to when the Knights Templar go over there. So this is when it kind of resurfaces. You've got all the Crusades. So from about, end of the 1000s, beginning of the 1100s onwards, you've got all these Europeans who are like, yeah, we know about the Bible, we're all good Catholics. We've all studied, warrior monks and all that. We've done the churchy thing. And to get over there and to get a bit of a shock because a lot of the material that even now we don't have that's disappeared was still available. They were talking to the Sufis, they were talking to the Muslims, they were talking to the people who still had all this material, and finding out that maybe the version of Christianity that they had wasn't quite as authentic as the version they'd found in the Middle East. So it's almost like a game of two halves. You've got part one is the early stuff,
Right.
and part two is the later stuff. And I'm not really going to come up to date much further than the medieval because I think that really that's where we still are. So you kind of have the blossoming at the beginning of the first millennia, and then that rumbles on, and then you got another blossoming then again at the second millennia, and that rumbles on. And we're now at the start of the third millennium. It's about time, I think, that somebody pulled all those loose ends together. And that's what it's looking like. But I mean, it could be, potentially from day one, it might be 50 years to get this
Yeah.
book together,
Yeah.
half a
Mark,
century.
could you tell me, you said a lot of this information has, I
Yeah,
think you just said that disappeared or whatever. And are
yeah.
the elites hiding this for hiding history on us? The history is not what we think it is. Or do you think the elites are going in there and destroying a lot of these documents, Mark? The biblical?
Um, if you'd have asked me that question when I started the book, which was in the 1970s, I'd have probably agreed with you and I'd have thought, well, yeah, maybe they are hiding a lot of stuff, a lot's destroyed. But we're now in a position where most of the material that we thought had gone has now been translated and it's finally come out. So it took them a huge amount of time to do the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, that was stupidly long amount of time to
Yeah.
translate that.
Mhm.
I can't remember how long it was, 30, 40 years to get some of them out. Whereas the Nag Hammadi library, which the Americans translated, it's three times bigger than Dead Sea Scrolls. They had that in print in 3 years. So clearly the stranglehold the church had over the Dead Sea Scrolls did play a part in that. And then some of them have been, like the Gospel of Judas and things like that, have just been thrown in the bin, 2,000 years ago and assumed to have been completely lost until one turns up, in a burial. And it's like, oh, hang on a minute, we do still have this, it is an early book. In terms of, is it a conspiracy? I think that most people, straight away, they think of the Vatican Library. When I saw the second Dan Brown movie, where they're in the Vatican Library and the air cuts out and he's in this big glass tank and it looks like he's gonna suffocate in there, so he pushes a bookcase over and breaks the front of the glass tank. And no, that is absolute fiction. That is nothing like the Vatican Library. It does not look like that. The Vatican Library is 3.5 miles of Dexian shelving that
Yeah.
looks like it came out of your garage, and it's been built up over 2,000 years. So no one person knows what's in there. They don't know where everything is. And they're very hesitant to let anybody in there because obviously it's got some really valuable stuff down there. They don't want
Right.
damaging. It
It's
is
also,
hermetic.
yeah, it's also got some uh, very important, I guess,
Oh, this,
information
yeah.
they don't want us to know. Is that
Both
true?
sides of the coin. I think there's stuff down there that maybe they prefer we didn't know, and there's stuff down there that we do know about. But at the same time, like for example, the Templars were a good example. Somebody was, rummaging through one of the shelves and pulled out this papal document that basically forgave the Templars in 1380. The Catholic Church said, yeah, the whole thing was a complete stitch up. We wish we'd never done
Mhm.
it. Templars were great. There's nothing wrong with them. Well, that was found in 2007. So, they kind of, it's almost like doing archaeology on archaeology. To find anything down there is really, really difficult. And they are touchy. I think there's only three, maybe four scholars that actually know the way around down there, Catholic scholars. And then the rest of it is just overkill. There's too much stuff. You could have 100 scholars working 100 years and still not get through everything that they've got down there. So, and yeah, I think they are deliberately hesitant, but not because they're trying to hide anything, because they want to protect what they've got. And I don't think they really know what they've got. There's more stuff down there than you can imagine.
Now,
Um,
do you think they know about? I'm going to throw this in here on you
hmm,
since you
yeah.
cover this topic. You think they know a little bit about extraterrestrials being involved in a lot of this biblical stuff and in and out of history through biblical history, Mark?
Well, over time, there's been a lot of accounts of things which are clearly not ordinary, regular human things. I mean, they recently got a translation, I think it was 1640 BC, of this Egyptian pharaoh. Didn't come out of the Vatican Library, but they translated all these hieroglyphs and the writings of the pharaoh. And he basically sent a whole company of people out to try and investigate these weird things. I think they're described as discs that were flying over his territory in Egypt, and they saw them, they witnessed them, and they wrote an account. So I think there's lots of accounts like that which could point towards something extraterrestrial going on or otherworldly going on. I mean, I said this in another interview. I said, one man's alien grey is another man's angel,
Yeah,
you know?
that's true. Yeah, we
Um,
they're still confusing them with angels, and they don't really know who they are. At
yeah,
least half of them. I don't
yeah,
know. I've had some contacts, and I don't really know. I know it's a spiritual feeling. They've never hurt me. I'm still
no, no.
here. I'm still pumping air. I'm still right
Yeah,
here
but
on
yeah,
Earth.
well, all the descriptions that you find of angels, which obviously they've got all of those in the Vatican Library, that's the kind of material that they've ended up keeping. All of those descriptions could equally as well just substitute the word angel for alien.
Yeah,
And, the way people react, the way they feel, what they see, the light, the temperature changes, the interaction, the conversation, it basically just sounds like an angel.
yeah.
Interdimensional being is the latest label. That's what they are, interdimensional beings.
Yes, that's what the government is talking about.
Yeah,
Now in the Bible, since we're talking about the biblical thing
yeah,
and the mysterious Bible, in which you
yeah.
got a topic on, that they say that the four people or men who wrote the Bible is Paul, what John, and who else was it? There's four of them. They
Luke,
said Luke, and yeah, they
and
said that
Matthew.
they yeah Matthew. They said that they did not write all that book. They said that they were going. Matter of fact, they wrote it after Christ, and Christianity didn't exist during Christ because that's it didn't start till what 325 A.D. Uh,
Yeah, essentially you're right, but you're right from how can I put it? From a mechanical point of view. In other words, when Jesus was alive and just after he died, nobody really thought anything of it. It's like Joe Bloggs down the road who was a carpenter, he's popped his clogs. It's not very significant, But then as things began to happen, as it was obvious that things were snowballing, people then said, well, yeah, maybe we should write things down. So basically, what you've got in the New Testament, the Gospels and Acts, that's people running around trying to gather all the stories and the material together. So yes, it does appear that it's been cobbled together from, bits and bobs.
mhm.
But that's exactly how it was done. It was cobbled together from bits and bobs. I only recently discovered the oldest actual surviving datable writing are the letters of Paul. The Paul's letters are older because they were written first. He was
Right,
writing letters to all sorts of people before they actually got the Gospels together and sorted all of that out. But I think it's a mechanical issue. I think that's a mechanical problem. And again, I was chatting to somebody the other day, and they were saying, "Oh, well, why did Jesus never write anything down? Why don't we have the Gospel of Jesus?" And I just said, "Well, you're looking in the wrong place. The guy grew up in Egypt, so if he wrote anything, it was either in hieroglyphs or it was in handwritten Egyptian. And everyone's assuming that he's going to be writing in Latin or Greek or Aramaic, or yeah, he could speak all of those, but back at the core, as a child, he was educated in Egypt." So, when he sat, when they accused that woman of adultery and he sat there and it says he's drawing in the sand, the word that's used for drawing can also mean pictures or pictographs or pictograms
mhm.
or, pictograms, which
Right,
are hieroglyphs. He's doodling in hieroglyphs. So if you don't know what you're looking for, you're never going to find it, are you? So that's why there's no writing of Jesus that survived, because everybody's looking for the wrong writing in the wrong place, which I'm hoping to address in the book. I'm hoping to sort of get into that and break it down a bit, because there's a hell of a lot of stuff in the Bible that's of Egyptian origin, and that's in the
right,
New Testament as well. And it's amazing because there are no Jews in the Old Testament and there are no Christians in the New Testament because neither of them had happened. That
yeah.
hadn't happened yet.
Could you
We're
tell me, Mark, on Jesus's teachings? I'm hearing a lot on the internet, and a lot of philosophers and archaeologists are coming out and saying that Jesus didn't come here to save us. He come here to teach us that God was within us, and we didn't have to go through a church or a minister to find heaven or find Jesus. So that God is within you, and that's the message that most of these modern day philosophers are talking about. Mark, can you shine some light on that?
Yeah, Jesus goes even further because he says, "Don't worship me. I'm only the representative of God. Worship
Yeah,
God." And when you think about it, that's logical because he was following the Ten Commandments. The first
yeah,
commandment is, thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, which is what Jesus was doing. So The problem we've got is we take things out of context. We pull things out of time, we pull them out of culture. Um, what people need to do is just go and get hold of a book, because they do these books, or get it online or whatever, of just the words of Jesus, nothing else, because they exist. They've pulled all of the words out, or get a Bible with the words of Jesus marked in red, and just read those words. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of siding with the scholars here. I think the scholars are right. And as the hierarchy of the literal church started to grow, and it became what we've got as the church now, the sort of mystical, mythical, Gnostic church got persecuted out of existence. It was wiped out, it was outlawed. So as that's one of the main thrusts of me getting stuck into the first 4 centuries. I want to see how much of that original church still exists, and where that's gone.
Yeah.
What's happening with all of that. But I did have a great conversation with somebody only this afternoon about the idea that most people go, "Oh, Gnostics, it must be spiritual. Everything's mystical, everything's mythical.
Hmm.
Jesus never existed. He's just a mystical archetype." Well, that doesn't work. You cannot have that unless you also put in the physical, archaeological, historical side of it. Because that's like saying, "Oh, we've invented a wheel, but we're not going to do anything with it. We're not going to put it on a car. We're not going to have it drive. We're not going to have this thing roll anywhere. We're just going to have a mystical wheel. Let's all join hands and imagine a wheel." Well, you can't do that. You've got to have the practical, the gritty, the hard side of it. And that really is Jesus. It's Jesus's life, it's his history. There's papyrus out there that you can date. We've got a John's Gospel virtually going back to the end of the 1st century. We've got early stuff. We know what Jerusalem looked like at the time of Christ. We've got all the physical evidence. And the Bible is 99% of the time it's proven right, and the 1% of the time is probably because we don't know. You know, um,
Yeah.
and you have to do both. You've got to say, right, it's a physical, tangible, real thing, but then at the same time, it's also a mystical, mythical, spiritual thing. And you can't really have one without the other. The Gnostics tend to lean a little bit too far towards the, mystical, mythical.
Yeah.
Um,
The
and
Bible in geographical terms is correct on a lot of their locations from what a lot of the
yeah,
archaeologists are finding out, Mark.
yeah,
Yeah, they
yeah.
find that out. Yeah.
People have in the past took the mickey and said, "Oh, that's not possible," or "That's in the wrong direction," or whatever.
Mhm.
And then lo and behold, like you say, give it a few years, a bump, it turns up where it's not supposed to be. So yeah, the best one I like is, I'm not really sure how it pans out, but the idea that Jonah was spewed out by a whale, or it says big fish. He's
Mhm.
swallowed by a big fish, and after 3 days in the belly of the big fish, he gets spewed out, and then he turns up in Nineveh. What people don't realize is Nineveh is 600 miles away from the sea. So in that account, somewhere somebody's lost the time and distance.
Right.
They've
Yeah.
they've done what I've just said you shouldn't do. They've decontextualized it. They've took it out of time and space. They haven't paid attention to the geography. Um, but
That
that's like,
sounds like the whale was a UFO craft,
well,
Mark.
it could have been, or
Yeah.
as far as I know, it's a big fish. I'm going to go with what it says. It's a big fish, because very recently, actually, some guy was accidentally swallowed by a whale, and it did end up sticking him up. He was a diver, so it is possible. It can
Yeah.
be done. So yeah, like I say, people used to say, "Oh, whales, whales, they live on plankton. There's no way they could swallow anybody." But there is a species of whale that can, because it has, fairly recently.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm going to be starting on my fifth book. I know that you got 11 or 13 books, but my
Mm,
fifth book is going to be short stories, and it's going to
mm.
be like interdimensional and ET, like stories, true happenings, and short stories where people might read them better because on the internet they
Yeah.
people like short reads anymore. So that's fine. But yeah, also my fourth book is probably going to go to Barnes and Noble in store
Wow, that's
locations. So
good. That is
yeah,
good.
so I'm really excited about that. So
Well, the book that I wrote a section for is called Weird Time, and it's about time slips.
yeah,
That's an American publication. It's available on Amazon. You'd find that really interesting because it's written in that style of
yeah,
short story,
yeah,
and it's a whole string of what happens when time goes wrong, and it doesn't behave itself. So you'd
Is
love
that
that. Weird Time, it's called.
Yeah, my first chapter is going to be short stories of people that just disappear on you, right?
Yeah,
Right before your eyes. You turn and you look, and they're gone, and then you try to track them down. They're not there. I got about four stories that's going to be in the first chapter of that. That could be a time thing. Are these time
could be.
travelers, Mark? You think?
It could be. It could be. I mean, I'm not sure how it works. I've got a cat that does exactly what you just described. He's in one room 1 minute and all the doors are shut, and then next minute he turns up in another room somewhere else, or he'll come
Really?
back the other way, and oh, we don't know how he does it. He's
He could be an ET that's watching
yeah,
you, but I don't
liquid
know.
liquid cat. He
Yeah,
comes under the
liquid cat.
door, and you
But
don't.
yeah,
Yeah,
we're diving back and forth into the
yeah,
ET
yeah,
subject, and which is good,
yeah.
is good. But I wanted to get more into the Egyptian thing. You mentioned that, Mark, and you have some notes and some topics on that. Now,
Mm,
what I wrote a third book, The Angels and Supernatural, and it had Egyptian stories in there with Isis,
yeah.
and that type of thing. There's 2500 BC, I think, somewhere in there. But they have like 12 commandments or 14 commandments, and that's, I think the Bible actually followed a lot of the Egyptian layouts of what they did. Mark,
Well,
is that true?
the biggest clue is in the Old Testament itself, because what the Jews refer to as the Torah, which are the first five books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Judges, Deuteronomy, those books are attributed to Moses. And it says without any hesitation, Moses was second only to Pharaoh. So what you're dealing with here is Moses is essentially is a pharaoh. That's what he is. So he's privileged to be able to get hold of all of the mysteries of Egypt. I mean, this is BC. This is like, back in the days of Akhenaten or whatever. It's that kind of, early Egypt. But then the foundation of the Old Testament comes directly unashamedly out of Egypt. So, as an archaeologist, I find that whole Old Testament section really interesting because I read it like you would read Egyptian archaeology.
Mhm.
All the plagues relate to the gods, and
Right.
him being found in a basket of reeds is the Egyptian creation story, and then later on, further on, David and Solomon, when they're doing Psalms and Proverbs, they're nicking some of that material, some of the hymns of the Arton from Akhenaten, are verbatim almost the same. They're copying them straight in. But you would expect that, I mean, the whole Israelite nation in the form of the 12 tribes originate in Egypt. That's where they come from.
Hmm.
It's Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, let my people go. So some of the things we take for granted actually do point very directly to Egypt. That's where we should be looking really for origins. And then, as I said earlier on, there's Herod killing all the babies, at the birth of Jesus. So he flees, him and his family run away, and they run away to Egypt. That's where they go. And he doesn't appear again until he's in the temple in Jerusalem. He's 12 years old and he's running rings round the Egyptian, Jerusalem high priests. These are the best of the best with honors,
Right.
in Jerusalem. And he's just come back from Egypt and he's running rings around them, because he studied in Egypt, and again, honestly, early Christianity, if you go back into that as a subject, Alexandria, your head will just go, there's so much stuff going on in Alexandria.
Hmm.
Um, and even in Egypt, I mean, when the temple was destroyed in Jerusalem and they hadn't got the temple anymore, there was another temple in Egypt. A breakaway group of Jews had gone off to Elephantine Island at Aswan and built another temple. So there were two of them. I mean, who tells you this? Nobody tells you this. So these are the kind of things I'm getting into with the book. When I went over to Egypt in 2025, I was talking to the Coptic church because the Copts are the original Egyptians. Okay, everybody else in Egypt is Arabic, but the Copts, they're about 22% of the population are Coptic. So I spent loads of time talking to these guys. And they say, oh, yeah, we know exactly where the Holy Family went. They stopped here and they stopped there and they came down here and there was a miracle here and this book was written there. And the whole story, they have books on it in Egypt. You can actually go and study these books of where they went and what they did that are completely unheard of outside Egypt.
Hmm.
Nobody talks about it. Well, if the Son of God arrives in Egypt, you're going to make a note of that. Yeah, that's where he went. This is what he did. And they did. They made a note of it. They took record of him being there.
I know
It,
in our
this,
past shows, Mark, that you
yeah,
might have mentioned this too, and I've had other people I've interviewed that said that the ancient Egyptians had the technology themselves. They didn't need ET's input. They were a very intelligent group of people, and they built the pyramids and everything else. And also, secondly, I wanted to ask you about that new structure that they found underneath. I guess the one big pyramid there,
yeah, that's an
Mark.
interesting one.
Yeah.
I mean, professionally, as part of what I was doing as an archaeologist, I studied geology. So I got my O level and went on to do other things. But I've got geology as well. So I looked at that and I thought, I'm really not sure what's going on here because they're using technology to scan below the pyramids and scan below the ground that really isn't quite designed for that and it's not quite up to the job. So what they're seeing might be something geological. It might be a geological phenomena of some kind. So I'm in the position where I'm not saying they didn't see anything. I'm not saying it's made up. It's not invented.
Hmm.
There's clearly something there, but it might be a case of not one thing or the other. It's not necessarily man-made, but the structure that sits on top of it certainly is. So then that raises the question, how did they know where to put the pyramid? So actually, that's a bigger mystery. I don't think there's all these chambers. I don't think you've got like, 300-foot deep shafts underneath the pyramid. That's nonsense. I don't think they're there. But I think the pyramid is very specifically sited on top of something that's important to the Earth's crust. The other amazing thing is if you get all the landmass, if you roll out the Earth's landmass to a flat surface and you go from the highest point north to the lowest point south and the furthest point east to the furthest point west, where those two lines cross is bang in the middle of the pyramid. So it's in the center, if you like, of all of the dry land. And you look at things like that. You look at the whole issue of the pyramid. I mean, it's been studied to the nth degree. It is an absolutely incredible structure that speaks of some kind of super technology. It's
Yes.
not really the pyramid. It's about not about what's there. It's about what's not there. What were they up to? What do we not know? What was missing? How did they do what they did? You know, um, I mean, there was a whole offshoot of the Nile that came right up to the very foot of the pyramid, and they put a canal all the way around the bottom of the pyramid. So there's no water there now. So what were they up to? What
Are
were
the
they doing with
pyramids
it?
are the pyramids older than 6,000 years old, Mark?
Um, Khufu, I think, is about 2600 BC. That's about your limit. That's where they're saying it's Khufu. But there's certain little bits of evidence that have popped out. Like when they built the pyramids, under one corner, they went over the top of some other burials. And the burials seem to be a hell of a lot older than the pyramid. So it's almost like they knew what they were doing and they knew where they were going.
Hmm.
And that rubber stamps the site as being a lot older. The Sphinx is another one. We've got this geological time scale thing where it appears to be washed by water. So the last time it rained in that part of the world was, 10,500 BC. So that means that if the Sphinx was washed with water, then it would be that sort of age. So there's a lot of speculation about that, and the Sphinx is pointing to Leo, constellation Leo, at 10,500 BC. The shaft in the Great Pyramid points to the Cirrus, which is their pole star. So when you start looking at the star alignments and what was around at the time, it does seem to be older, or the technology that's behind it is a lot older than what we're actually seeing today. The Egyptians themselves, I mean, when Solon, who was Plato's grandfather, when he went to Egypt and he got the legend of Atlantis, the Egyptian priests that gave him that said, you Greeks, you think you're dead old, you think you're dead clever, you've got all this technology and stuff. They said, we've got books here that go back 12,500 years. And that was in 750 BC. So, I wish we had their library. That's all I can
Yeah.
say, So
Yeah.
clearly
That
there's a lot going on.
that
Yeah.
Alexandria library, they destroyed that. Did the Christians destroy that? I guess, Mark.
Um, yeah, three times. It got burnt three times. I think the Romans took a pop at it because they didn't like what it said and what was in it. And then the Christians took a pop at it because they didn't like what was in it. And then the Muslims took a pop at it because they needed something to feed their bread ovens with. So they burnt a lot of the scrolls to feed the ovens. So it was hit three times, which should be a lesson to us. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
We're
Also,
obs
that happened in South America when the
Yeah,
Spanish invaded down there in 1520 or 1530, something like that, and
yeah.
they took all their knowledge and destroyed
And
it. And
burnt it. Yeah,
some of the
yeah,
kings of some of those tribes said, "No, don't destroy this. This is knowledge, and you might
yeah.
want to see this." But they said, "No." I think what I was getting to a while ago about churches and what
Mm.
Jesus Christ was teaching, that churches teach fear, and in church they teach fear, and they limit you to what you can do, and they actually dictate, this is your guidelines in life. But that's not exactly what Jesus wanted.
No.
And I'm taking a look at what they destroy all this knowledge out of fear. And I think that's what religion stirs up, is fear. And it's, you're going to go to hell if you do this or not, so I think that's the mentality that we've had throughout history, Mark.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing that things are swinging back towards what Jesus actually said and what Jesus actually did. I mean, he never came to start a church, he never came to form a club. That's why none of the New Testament was written during his lifetime, because nobody really thought it was going to go any further than him. And then everyone jumps on it and it becomes, what we now know. But somewhere along the way, we lost that individual responsibility. It's down to us. It's our relationship to God. I mean, at no point will there ever be anybody else there when we die. We die, we go on to whatever's next, and we have to face that alone. It's for us to deal with. And there's a lot of that kind of background to what Jesus is saying you know and as far as we know, unless things change, we've only got one shot at this. If we approach life with the mentality that we've only got this is all we've got, from beginning to middle to end. Yeah, we might come back, we might not come back, who knows? That's a different question. But make the best of what we've got. That's really what it's all
Right.
about.
Yeah, Mark, I've been seeing a lot on the internet too. I don't know if it's the ideology that's being pushed around the world, in which is trying to sway us into the darkness. And it's like good over evil nowadays that we're fighting.
Yeah,
And people are
yeah,
just going crazy around the world. And this is for entertainment purposes only. It's not, I don't have proof on that, but everybody sees it in the news, and they don't show you a
yeah,
lot of the news, but it's out there.
yeah.
But what I'm saying is, this good and evil thing that's been going on, they're trying to scare us away from believing in God. And also there's some people out there, some professors, that are saying that we don't go to heaven. We die. Once we die, we're dead. And they said you go
Um,
6 feet down, and that was it. I remember my dad saying that, and I got mad at him for saying that. He
yeah,
said you
that
just
the,
die and go 6 feet down. Mark, what do you
the
think about that?
well, they're referred to as nihilists, people that
Yeah,
think that there's nothing after death. Scientifically, actually, there's an awful lot of evidence now, huge amount of evidence that there's more to it than we know.
right.
And a lot of the evidence, funnily enough, is supporting the ancient wisdom. So, like, for example, one of the things they've recently discovered is that mitochondrial DNA, for example, communicates with itself
Yes.
using light. Well, by definition, that means we are beings of light. Well, you don't get much more biblical than that, and that now is supported by science. They've stuck somebody in a dark room with a hypersensitive camera, and they've discovered that we fluoresce. We give off light frequency. All of us do,
Mhm.
but we just can't see it because we're not wired for that wavelength, that frequency. So again, we're beings of light, which is exactly what all of the spiritual orders have been saying. And then there's the famous, experiment where they weighed someone who was alive, and then somebody died. They weighed that 21 grams, disappeared, went missing. So
Yeah.
they, oh, that must be the weight of the soul. When you die, you lose
Hmm.
21 grams. I mean, that's been messed about with. It might be true, it might not be true, but you know, uh, certainly there's evidence that when you're alive, you're alive, and when you're dead, you're not there. You've gone somewhere else. Um, and then obviously anybody that thinks you just die and get buried, well, the entire supernatural realm, the entire different wavelengths, different frequencies, multidimensional, multiverse, the whole of that. That just goes out the window. If it's like you get to the end and it's just that's it. Tends to render everything pointless, but it also leads to the chaos. The chaos we're seeing in
Yeah.
society and general. Because if this is all there is, then people will be selfish and make the best of it and blow the consequences because there aren't
Yeah.
any.
That's what I heard that
Um,
the elites are doing. That's why they do all this evil stuff to people and kill
well,
people,
it
whatever,
depends on
because
your
they,
definition of evil.
yeah,
Because there
yeah,
can't be a devil without a god. There can't be evil without good.
yeah,
It's balance.
yeah.
There's an element of balance there. So in admitting to one, you're also admitting to believing in the other. So it kind of goes wrong.
There's a minus and there's a plus in
There is,
electricity
there
and
always
in
is.
light
Yeah,
and in
yeah,
our
there always
bodies.
is.
They say
Yeah,
our
yeah,
heart is a big battery, is what the heart is. So, and
yeah.
the brain and the heart's connected. But no, I look at this and I think, no, I think this world could be a matrix, and that's why the bad people, the elite people, are taking advantage of it because they're saying, well, this is just a movie. This is just a matrix. This is just a holographic world. We can do anything
Mm.
we want and not be penalized for it. That's their thought. That's what I heard. That's their
Yeah.
thought. Mark, what do you think on that?
Well, the evidence is pointing to the fact that we're almost self-creative. So we create our own world. So, you kind of get what you choose, and you get what you imagine, you get what you create. Um, Even if you take out the spiritual dimension, everything there is, everything that exists started off up here. We imagined our environment, we created it, we made it, we invented it, so it's coming from us, it's coming from somewhere.
Hmm.
So, why would you want to alter that for the worse? Why would you choose to then apply that to something that's evil or bad or negative? And this argument where, oh, there's no consequence and there's no such thing as evil, it's all neutral, that doesn't work because of cause and effect, because there
Karma.
is cause and effect. Yeah,
Yeah,
karma,
karma.
and you're going to harm somebody and you're going to destroy something and it's going to backfire elsewhere because that's how the world is wired. That's how things happen. You've
Well,
only got to
yeah.
look at chaos formula, and all
Hmm.
that sort of thing. You can see it in action. You can see it happening. So again, why would you want to go down that route? That's not something that I want to invest any time and effort in, because it's not going to have good results. It's going to have a
Yeah.
bad end.
Yeah.
So
I
even from, just from a human, from an earthly human point of view, it's not really a workable philosophy to, decide to declare that you're an evil dictator and just do your own thing.
the three
That's,
the three words that I believe that Jesus spoke was love, kindness, and forgiveness. And
yeah,
those are the things that create karma, or I call spiritual currency. And if you
yeah,
call heaven, even if you go into the quantum theory and heaven is dimensions, 11
yeah,
dimensions or more, then your spiritual currency is going to go take you to the dimension that maybe you're worthy of. Could
yeah,
that be a good
yeah.
thought, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, Jesus said himself, he said the kingdom of heaven. He kept saying, oh, the
Yeah.
kingdom of heaven. Well, every reference to the kingdom of heaven is earthly. It's here. We're living in the kingdom of heaven, and it
Yeah.
could be. It
Yeah.
could be. We could be living in paradise if we combine everything that we know and everything we can do. This could be an amazing heaven on earth. It really could be fantastic. But we don't. For some reason, there's all these people that are just, built in obsolescence and greed, and they're not
Agreed. Yeah.
doing. Yeah, they're not doing the right thing. And again, Jesus said, of all the commandments, the greatest is love. Love thy neighbor as thyself, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, which is right across the religions. I mean, that's Buddhist, it's Christian, it's Hindu, it's right across them all. That do unto others as you would, have them do unto you. In
Yeah.
fact, I think it's even pagan. I think it's Platonic as well. It goes off in other directions. The
Hmm.
idea of, helping your fellow man to be better and have a better world. That's what we've lost.
Yeah.
That's what we're struggling with. Yeah.
When people ask me, do I think of there's life after death? I said, absolutely. Our
Oh
souls, our
yeah.
spirit goes somewhere in another
Yeah.
dimension or whatever, because I've seen interdimensional beings. I've seen paranormal
Yeah.
things happen that happen outside of our dimension. and there's another dimension and another, like you said, it could be a thin
Yeah.
veil right
Well,
between
we
us.
we live in a sealed sphere. We live
Hmm.
in a sealed environment. So you've got entropy. I mean, I'm speaking science here. Entropy dictates that you can't ever get rid of anything. Nothing ever becomes less than it actually is.
Hmm.
So that means when we die, we're giving out, yeah, there's physical remains, we're whatever, £3 fifty's worth of chemicals or whatever. That's what we are. But then the electrical side of us, that lives on as well. You can't diminish the amount of energy that is contained within planet Earth. So entropy dictates scientifically that when you die, your energy, spirit, if you like, your energy continues. It has to go somewhere. It doesn't just disappear. And that is absolutely straightforward, on the money, pure science. That's what it is. So
Yeah.
forget all the religion and the debates and the maybe and maybe not. There's enough proof, there's enough evidence, empirically that we survive. Parts of us go on.
And why are the, I mean, if we don't go on, if we don't have a soul, then why are the extraterrestrials so interested in us, and they abduct about 50% of us and examine us, our DNA, our physical bodies. They check on that, but they also know that we have a soul. And I imagine they know how to read the soul too. They have they're high tech. So, I think the reason I tell people this, I said, yeah, I said, why would the extraterrestrials be interested in this? I know. I've seen them. I've met them. I've been there, and I've had some abductions. I know all about this stuff. So I'm sure we go
Yeah,
somewhere else.
yeah,
Somebody said, how
yeah.
can you be absolutely sure? I said, I am sure.
Well,
We are.
imagine if you will, because this is a scenario I put at the end of one of the books. I think it's in Crystal Skulls and Human Heads, or it
Hmm.
might be in Europe's Roswell. But there's a conclusion at the end of that. You've got all these people going, "Oh, they're aliens. They come from another planet, or maybe they're coming from the future, because of superior technology and all this, that, and the other." No, there's actually a guy now in the American military. I can't remember his name, but he's an advisor to one of the UFO departments. And he's come out and said exactly what I said about 5, 6 years ago. These beings are technologically superior. They are
Hmm.
far superior to us. So, what happens if they were there at the beginning? What happens if they're actually coming from the very distant
Right.
past? That's where they're coming from. And what happens if in their society at that time they solve the problem of time and space? Because for them, if they can time travel and they can travel to any space, any place, anywhere, then time and space become completely irrelevant. They're no longer relevant because they can go anywhere, anytime they like. But in our time, as we're looking at it, I think they're coming from the distant past. And I think the reason they're coming now because they want to see where the planet has ended up. So they're abducting, chickens and possums, and they're taking grain and pieces of trees
Hmm.
and people and cattle. And, they're doing all these things to test them to find out where we're at. What's happened? Where is the planet now? I'm not saying we're necessarily finishing. We're not wrapping up. It's not the end of the world or anything like that. So don't panic. Don't go and panic buy stuff for survival. You don't need to.
Yeah.
But I think that's their interest. Their interest is that they're popping into this time frame to see where we're ending up. Because, of course, if they're coming from the future, they're in danger of creating a paradox and destroying themselves. If they come back in time and they screw something up, they could change the timeline. So that doesn't work. They can't be coming from another planet because you can't get into our planet. Our planet's shut. You can't get through the Van Allen belts,
Hmm.
physically. You could if you're an interdimensional being, but then if you're interdimensional, time and space don't matter.
Yeah. Portal travel. Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Portals.
think if you're looking for a time and a place for these things, they are us potentially. They could be us. They've got a single head, a single mouth, two eyes, 2 ears, 2 hands. They look like us. They're physically built to survive in our environment because obviously they do. So why not from the far distant past?
Yeah, what you're talking
Pre-Atlantis.
about, Mark, is that everything's kind of like in the past. We could be the past, and they're checking us out because they know. I know. I've seen several things happen to me. I've seen several humanoid ETs. They know where you're going to be exactly when and where, and that's where they meet you, and that's where they run into you. So they must have some kind of control, or they know something, or we could be the past to them
There's
also, Mark.
in, well, there's enough science to prove that I think that somebody was actually saying that Tesla invented a machine which they've got in the Pentagon, that will enable you to see time. It's said that Nostradamus did the same thing. He had a system by which he could see time. He could go and look at things
Right.
elsewhere. You get that with the prophets in the Bible as well. Ezekiel and what have you seems to be looking far, far ahead, far further into the future. So I don't think it's necessarily a matter of, past, present, and future. I think all of time, very much like Einstein said, it all exists somewhere, all at the same time. And from our point of view, we're just working our way through it. But because it exists everywhere at all times, if you can see it in that way, then as you rightly say, you can go anywhere to anybody, any point in
Hmm.
time, because time and space no longer matter. I mean, it's really hard to get your head around that, but that seems to be what's happening in these craft. When people are abducted,
Yeah.
time and space is no longer relevant. Even in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Spielberg touched on that because all of the abductees came from different time periods and then they all come back at the same time with no time having passed.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
when you
so
have missing time or you know that something happened, but you
yeah.
just can't understand it, and you look at the clock, and sometimes your clock may say 5 or 10 minutes, but if you go somewhere else in outer space and they zoom you out there, then time out there doesn't exist, and they can get you
Oh,
back in 5 minutes. And it
yeah.
could be that quick. But I had somebody tell me, and people have to believe me because I'll tell you what, I'm too old to lie. This come from a humanoid ET's mouth back in 2010. I know people know the story, probably heard about it, but she come on point when I asked her how old she was. She said, "When are you humans going to get it? There is no time. There is no space. I mean,
There we go.
there is no
Yeah,
years or time," she said.
no,
And
no.
so, and she proved to be an ET. So now I believe her, Mark. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. Time is a human construct. That's what it is. It's a framework for us to be able to measure where we are at a point in whatever the week, the month, the year. They never had it in the past. They moved with the rhythms that they were picking up from planet Earth.
mhm.
There was so much debate over how to sort the calendar out. I'm not even going to go there.
Yeah.
That's a whole book just on its own, what they've done to muck about with the calendar,
It's
and
supposed to be 13 months, right?
oh, it's all over the place. Honestly, everybody had a different. I do it in the King Arthur book for a laugh because trying to date, when things are happening with King Arthur, because they're running on about five different, calendars, and I literally just go through medieval Europe, and you're sort of going 1123, 1124, 1123 again, oh, 1122 now, you're just jumping from one year to another depending on what the calendar is. It's bonkers, honestly.
Yeah, Mark, you talk about the Templars in this
Yeah.
book too. Now, we have a popular show here, Oak Island. I don't know if you guys
Yes.
get it or see it. It's one of the top shows. Used to be, I think it fell back
Yeah.
to third or fourth place now, but it's a good documentary type of show. And they have scientists who have come up and agreed with them that some of the dig sites are like 1230 back in 1230 back when the Templars were
Yeah.
hot and heavy at that time,
Yeah.
and they said that that's a Templar site there at Oak Island, and that's
Yeah.
where they buried a lot of the treasures. Do you agree with that, Mark?
I've seen some of the dating evidence for some of the things they've found. And yeah, medieval, I will agree with them. There's evidence of medieval activity there. They did a great investigation on one of the inlets because they thought it was perhaps a harbour. It looked
Hmm.
like it was man-made. Um, and it is. And I think that came back with a date of about 1230, something like
Yeah,
that. Um, and yeah, I think it depends where you are in your thinking, because if you've been educated to believe that Columbus discovered America and America's developed along the lines of the white culture, etc., and all that, Templars don't even figure in that. They're not, the fact that the fact that Columbus's dad happened to be a knight and that he had Templar flags on his sails when he arrived in
right.
14, whatever it was. People forget all that because he was standing on the shoulders of giants. His dad and his dad's dad and all the Navy going back to goodness knows when were all borrowing stuff from the Templars. So there's plenty of evidence that the Templars were in America. So as soon as you get rid of this idea, that they never made it, the answer is actually I think they did. There's lots and lots of people that have been visiting America for a long period of time. Irish monks, Phoenician traders, the Egyptians, the Romans, all sorts of people, the Vikings, or we know about the Vikings. You need to get hold of a book by Barry Fell called America BC. You'll only ever get a second-hand copy because it came out in the 70s and it was banned in the United States. So you might find it on Amazon. But that's all it's called, America BC. And
Mhm.
literally, he just goes through a list of all the archaeology that he had in his day, and it fills a book, and it's incredible. So all that's happening is it's playing out the same way on Oak Island. It's playing. It's all there on Oak Island. I mean, I do hope they do find the treasure because it's been going on a hell of a long time, hasn't it? You
they,
know what I mean?
I think they had a good run at 11 years, I think, so far, and they're
Mm.
making money at this. I would imagine the TV station they got about a crew of about 15 people.
Yeah,
That's a big payday there. But
yeah.
Mark, let's get into the last topic I wanted to get into. Knights Templar is very interesting. I'm always interested in
Mm.
that because I always think that Knights Templar were way ahead of their time. They knew about knowledge. They knew what was going on, and
Yeah.
they were above and beyond the average person back then. Do you agree with that, Mark?
Yes. The more you study the Knights Templar, the more you realize that they had access to pretty much 1,000 years of previous knowledge. As I said, that's why they're in this book that I'm writing now, because when they got out there to the Middle East, they just had a huge amount of stuff available to them that we don't have available to us now. I mean, they arrive in Jerusalem, they decide they're going to take over what is now the Al Aqsa Mosque, and, it's Solomon's Stables. First thing they start doing is digging. The world's first archaeologists. They're
Right.
clearly on a mission. They're heading for the site of the old temple, Solomon's Temple. So these guys were well informed, and they did the research. They knew what they were doing. They spoke to the locals. Well, times that by the entire of Europe, and times that by about 340 years, and unlimited resources, unlimited access. And they had access to all the monastic libraries and the stuff that was there before the dissolution of the monasteries. So things that were destroyed by Henry VIII, things that was destroyed by the English Civil War and other civil wars, and all this kind of thing, stuff that has been rushed into the Vatican Library and dumped in a corner to protect it, because of changes in above ground environments, what have you. They had access to all of that. It was current. They could walk into any church in Europe and just go and have a read in the library. So phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And the stuff that came out from the Templars that started the Renaissance.
Yeah.
Gothic
Architectural. Yeah.
architecture,
Yeah.
medicine,
Yeah.
mathematics. Proper kick up the ass for Europe. Because Europe had just let it all slide. They were far too busy fighting each other and getting invaded by Vikings and what
Yeah.
have you. So
About what's going on now, I guess.
yeah, kind of
You don't even want
medieval
you
version.
don't
Yes,
even want to talk about that, I guess. But
yeah,
no,
same thing as happening now, but with swords and clubs.
yeah. Let's talk about this last topic. I want to get out there about the UFOs and ETs. I know people. I've had a few shows that didn't involve ETs, and I must be stereotyped or something.
Well,
But
yeah, because
not
we keep going back to it, don't we? Like that all the
Yeah,
way
yeah,
through.
because
It's
well, that's what a lot of my
yeah,
followers like. They like the
yeah,
story. We
yeah,
got some people missing now, highfalutin people like a general, and we got a researcher. Several. I heard. Then I saw a list last night of about 7 or 8 that's disappeared the last 3 or 4 months, and they worked with UFO top secret stuff,
yeah,
and now they're starting to disappear. Even the news is carrying it. So this is not for entertainment purposes. This is
yeah, but
factual because
yeah,
the
yeah,
news is carrying
yeah.
these disappearances, and Fox is on it. They're talking about this pretty regular, and so is Newsmax. But they're talking about these people disappearing and why. Because disclosure, it was supposed to come out, but they're pushing it back. And now I think they're trying to get rid of these knowledgeable people, the whistleblowers, and they're slowly,
Um,
I don't know what's going on, Mark. What do you think?
always look at both sides of the coin, because let's assume that I was a fairly well-known whistleblower. They're about to have disclosure. So where do I want to be in that? What do I want to happen? Well, I might say, do you know what? I don't want to be a part of this. I want to disappear. I don't want people beating me door down to try and, get to me and say, hey, you were right all along. What else can you tell us? Because that inevitably, that's what happens. So some of the people who are, quote, disappearing may have just been relocated, given another identity,
Yeah.
and got out of the way before the sticky brown stuff hits the fan. That might be what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
Obviously, the conspiracy theorists are like, oh, they've died, they've been bumped off by the secret services or whatever. It's much easier to just relocate somebody and give them a new life, just get them started somewhere else, another country, another identity. It happens all the time. It's happening
Yeah.
every week, it's happening every day.
FBI,
Yeah,
FBI, CIA,
yeah,
MJ6, all of
yeah.
them are doing this, and they do
And,
get
and
people.
and some of these people, I mean, I have been following it and I've been looking and
It's
thinking,
MI6. I'm sorry.
well, yeah, I'm looking at some of the people. I was thinking, yeah, maybe they've took, him out, but maybe they've relocated her. You,
Yeah.
you can sort of see who's who and what's what. I'm not sure this whole idea, there's this whole obsession with, oh, the secret services, ever since they took out a president, it's like, they're going to take these people out. Everybody's dead. It's all about assassins and shooting people, and it makes better press. It makes better news reading than saying, "Oh yeah, he packed his bags and he moved house." That doesn't make good press. Still alive somewhere else. Unless you happen to be Adolf Hitler, of course, and you've been relocated to Argentina. That's a different story.
Hmm.
But your average Joe blogs, and this idea, they've just bought, was it alien.gov? The United States government have just bought that domain name, alien.gov. I think they bought it this week,
Right.
in preparation, clearly, for what's coming up. I think they're still in the putting it together stage. They're still building this idea of, okay, we're going to disclose, but how are we going to do it? So um, let's say hypothetically 10 people disappear. Well, yeah, they might have bumped off two of them, but if I was a betting man, I bet the other eight have been relocated. I think that's what we're seeing here. But yeah, people are disappearing. They are sort of cleaning house. They're
How,
tidying up, ready for
how
something.
about some of us low-level influencers? Do we have anything to worry about, Mark?
Oh,
I had a young lady take a picture of me sitting in the back, and this is another little strange story. And she looked like she was about 25, but it's dark, about 7:40 at night. It was kind of dark, and I was sitting in behind my complex, the condo, and I was sitting in the back because it was nice weather, and I was getting fresh
yeah,
air, and
yeah,
and I heard a little tap on the. There's a fence, a white fence behind us, a tall one, and it's got an opening to where people can walk to the gas station or get what they
yeah,
need, milk or bread or whatever, and there's an opening there. So this gal was standing there with a cell phone over her head, and she was pointing it towards my way. And I heard the knock, or I think she made the noise for me to turn and look. So I looked around, and I think after that, it was just a couple of seconds after that, she dashed through the opening of the fence, and I thought, oh my God, she took a picture of me. And so I walked over the next day to right where she was standing, and actually she had a straight shot, camera
mm,
shot towards me at that angle where the between my car and myself, where I was sitting there at the back porch, and she got that picture of me, and I thought, oh no, am I next?
You see, if that was
I,
if that was me, I would have shouted over, "Do you want an autograph to go with that?" Because it might just be because you're a familiar face to her.
well, I know, not
You
really.
never know.
I'm not that familiar, I guess, because my books sell slowly, but they're still selling the first ones. But this if this Barnes and Noble thing goes through, then
Yeah,
I'll be in tall cotton.
yeah, you'll be recognised. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
but
I am because obviously I'm
I
out there. You
know,
know what I mean? And
yeah,
I how can I put it? I think the whole security service, and this goes right across the board. If what you're saying is kind of not, it's not right, and it's bonkers, and it gets more and more aggressive and pushy and difficult, and some people really go for the sensational. You know what I mean? They really make up some stuff that is way out there. not supported at all. If you do that, I think you are in danger of being taken out, because they just get fed up with you. They're just like, enough is enough. That's that.
Yeah,
On
what
the
I
other hand, the likes of me and you, we're coming from a point of, witnesses, evidence,
mhm.
solid fact, personal experience. This is who we are. This is what we do. And I actually think, there's a kind of a grudging respect there, from because I know people in the security services and stuff like that. If you stick to your guns and that's who you are, and you're just stating your case, then you're not that big of a problem to them, because you sort of police yourself. You deal with your own issues. People come to you; they don't go mither them. You know what I mean? So on that level, I think they just leave most people to it. The majority
Mhm.
of people, they'll just leave them to it. Because there are, I mean, there's bigger fish than us out there. You know what I mean? David
Well,
Icke is still walking around. He's all
yeah,
right, and
yeah.
people like that. And that's because he's evidence based. Sometimes he misses the target, but that's not the point. What he's saying is based on something. He's got hard evidence to back it up.
How about Dr. Greer? What do you feel about Dr. Greer, Mark?
Yeah, he's not bad. He's probably in the same category. I don't necessarily agree with everybody, that
Yeah.
comes out with things. I mean, I've worked for Iconic TV. I've did an interview for one of his sons for one of their programs. So nothing against David, or Mr. Greer, or no, they're doing what they do. And I don't think it's a case of this getting away with it. I mean, of course they could take us out if they wanted to. I've been there when a guy was up on stage, giving away state secrets, and he dropped dead of a heart attack at the mic.
Hmm.
He was dead before he hit the stage. So I've been there when it's actually happened, and people were like, "Well, that's a bit weird. That looks like he was
Yeah.
hit with an energy weapon or something like that."
Hmm.
So I
They
know they
got
can do.
those. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they can do
Yeah,
all that. Of course they
yeah.
can.
I
If they
heard
really,
now that there is no really actual men in black, that they hire people out. They hire these cronies that don't know what they're really doing, and they're paid to do a job. Well, tag this guy, follow him. I had several people, guys, follow me in their
uh,
trucks and watch me from behind my
Well, yeah,
condo.
they don't call them spooks for nothing. They're out there to
Yeah,
spook you, and
yeah,
make you feel like that. But
intimidation. Yeah,
I mean, I like the X-Files take on that. That the actual guys who are the men in black wearing the dark glasses are also
hmm,
aliens. I quite like that as an idea. If you're going to do it properly. Have
yeah,
proper men in black. And
right.
again, it's something similar to what you've got in that film franchise, Men in Black. There are all sorts of weird things in there. Yeah, that's a whole
Well,
nother
it's like
topic.
now they got men in overalls.
Yeah,
Okay, I
yeah.
think we're gonna have to end the show. We're gonna have to let you get to bed. I know it's getting
Yeah, it's quite
late
late over
there,
here. Yeah.
and I want to thank everybody for listening in. And Mark
Yeah.
Olly, could you tell us where we can find you on the internet, or any of your books that's coming out?
Yeah, I always do the same thing. All the books, everything I've ever released in terms of hard material is on Amazon. You can go to Amazon, you can get it on there. If you want back catalogue, you want to go and see, more interviews, more TV programs,
Okay.
documentaries, YouTube, they're all on YouTube.
Hmm.
Um, if you want to come and find me, the only place you'll find me is on Facebook. So, send me a friend request. You can message me on Messenger. I'm quite accessible. So it's Amazon for product, YouTube for, stuff I've done before, and Facebook if you want to get in contact with me. That's
Okay, well,
it.
great. I appreciate you being on the show. Last week I kind of took a hiatus, and I've been working on my book and working on computer technology, trying to get things straight with myself, and working, like I said, working on my books mostly, and having meetings after meetings, and having a production guy help me with a trailer and songs and that type of thing. So it takes a lot of time, and when you get older,
Yeah,
you run out of time quicker, don't you? I mean,
you
you're not as
sure
old as
do.
I am, but you're going to
Yeah,
start feeling it for long.
yeah, I
Yeah,
do. I do feel it. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, we're going to say good night from the Strange Reality with Dave Emmons and my guest Mark Olly. Thank you so much for being with us, and good night or good afternoon, and everybody.